Oh, what a wonderful, momentous day for women's health of West Texas. This is an unbelievably highly successful event, and I just want you to know before I introduce the next person, it was his idea. He came to San Angelo as our chancellor of the Texas Tech system and said, "Brian, you need to start a Laura Bush Institute." They had one in Amarillo. And he said, "We need to start one down here in San Angelo." And as Linda's pointed out, I then, of course, turned it over, the delegator I am, to Dean Mayran. And Leslie Mayran has some funds in her college, and it was her innovation. And through Linda, they have done a phenomenal job. And that was just a few short years ago. But the next speaker that'll come up here and visit with you is Ken Hance became the third chancellor of the Texas Tech University system in December 1 of 2006. As Chancellor, Hance is the chief executive officer of all campuses and academic sites of Texas Tech University and the Texas Tech University Health Science Center and Angelo State University. His focus is to continue quality, enrollment growth, enhance research, and prepare all students for professional and personal success. Before coming chancellor, he was a partner at Hance Scarborough Austin Law Firm, where he also earned his bachelor's degree in business administration from Texas Tech in 1965 and the University of Texas Law School in 1968. He has a career in politics where he served in the Texas Senate. He was also a U.S. Congressman of the 19th Congressional District and the Texas Railroad Commission. Please join me in thanking and welcoming our Chancellor, Ken Hance.
San Angelo, I am proud of you. You have done a great job. We got this thing going about 3 years ago. Patty Gardner got after me, and every time I'd see her, she'd say, "When are you going to get Laura Bush out here? We'll put on a show you'll never forget it. It'll be the best." I mean, I'd see her, and before I could say hello, she just, like a bulldog, she was on me. Today I saw her and I walked up to say congratulations. She said, "I told you so." You did a great job. I'm proud to be associated with Angelo State. What we're doing in national security studies is affecting the military worldwide. We're the #1 person. We're the #1 school, what we're doing in that regard, and I'm very proud. We're doing things at Angelo State. And you talk about these events, this is the best event that we've had. Amarillo, Lubbock, Midland, Odessa, El Paso, you really have done an outstanding job, and I just want to say a special thanks to the people in San Angelo, and I love Angelo State. It's been a great thing for Texas Tech and a great thing for Angelo State for them to be in the same system. I want to mention one other introduction. Someone that was introduced a while ago, Jean Cox. Where are you, Jean? Stand up. Would you stand up, Jean? Is she? There she is. Jean's dad was a good friend of mine, and I served with him in Congress. He was Senator John Tower, and he was a true patriot, and we appreciate your being here. He loved this country, and he loved representing Texas. The keynote speaker today, is no surprise, Laura Bush, is originally from Midland, got her degree at SMU, and got a bachelor's and a master's, taught in Houston and Austin and Dallas, met George W. Bush, fell in love, and got 2 great daughters, and that she's been out front on women's health issues. And when we asked her to name our institute after her, she was very nice about it, and they wanted to know all that we were doing. We met with Lord Jenkins, that it was just all the people that we met with, and that she agreed to do it, and it's been great for us. It's helped us help people in nutritional education. It's helped us in research. But even more important than that, Laura Bush served with pride, dignity, poise. She was, no matter where you went, you were glad to say she was the First Lady of Texas. She was the First Lady. She was the First Lady of the United States. And I'll tell you this, Laura, you're always going to be our First Lady in West Texas. Laura Bush.
Thank you all. Thank you very much, Chancellor Hance. Thanks, everybody. Thank you all. I'm thrilled to be here today in San Angelo. It's great to be back in West Texas, so close to my home in Midland. And so thank you very much, Kent. Thank you for that. And thank you, Dr. May. Thank you for what you said as well and for incorporating the Laura Bush Institute as part of Angelo State and Texas Tech up here. I also want to recognize, of course, Laura Street, who's the Executive Director of the Laura Bush Institute for Women's Health, and Dr. Marjorie Jenkins, who's here with us. She's the founding Executive Director. A lot of this was really her idea, this idea to really study the differences, the gender differences that can make a difference in the way women are diagnosed and treated. Dr. Jenkins also just served as a mentor to one of our Egyptian fellows, an Egyptian woman who's part of the George W. Bush Institute, and that's part of our library. We brought women for the last 2 years from Egypt to learn leadership skills, and Dr. Jenkins, as busy as she is, took an Egyptian fellow, a woman who is an OBGYN in Egypt, to Amarillo, showed her everything. She met her family, and she'll stay in touch with her mentee for the rest of the year as part of the George W. Bush Women's Initiative at the Bush Library. Linda Ross, you're terrific. Thank you so much. You're just really, really great. And I have a special thanks to Liz Bates and Jackie Martin for making this beautiful luncheon for all of us. Thank you for chairing it and making it so lovely. And of course, I also want to thank the regional directors of the Laura Bush Institute for their terrific work in Lubbock and Midland and Amarillo, and then of course here in San Angelo. Many of the members of the Laura Bush Institute for Women's Health National Advisory Board are here. You saw them all. A lot of them are my friends from across our state, and I want to thank them very, very sincerely for serving on the National Advisory Board and for all of the things you do, and especially to Debbie Francis, who was the founding chair of the advisory board, and to Leanne White, who becomes chair today. Thank you very much to both of you for your service. They're my really good friends, too. I thought before I got started, you might want to report on some of my family members. You'll be happy to know that my father-in-law, President George H.W. Bush, is home from the hospital and he's doing very well. My mother-in-law, Barbara Bush, is her usual funny and feisty self. She and I have traveled together on Monday to the Gerald R. Ford Library in Grand Rapids, Michigan for a First Ladies Conference on the occasion of what would have been Betty Ford's 95th birthday, and they're doing great. President Bush and my mother-in-law, Barbara, are showing George and me the way to age with grace. Last summer in Maine, Bar walked her dogs on the beach twice a day, every day. From both of them, we've learned that all we know we have is now. So to take advantage of our lives as they are and to walk on the beach every chance you get. I'd like to report that now that George and I have left the White House and moved into our new home in Dallas, our lives are back to normal. But I think I may have forgotten what normal is. When you're married to the President of the United States, you don't worry too much about him leaving his wet towels on the floor. But in Dallas, things are different. Memo to the ex-president. Turmoil in East Timor is no longer an excuse not to pick up your socks. Since we've been home, George and I have both written books and gone on book tours, and I might say New York Times best-selling books. The New York Times probably hated putting us #1 on the bestseller list for weeks on end. And now when we're not getting our new house in order or giving speeches, we're busy planning for the dedication of the George W. Bush Presidential Center on April 25th at my alma mater, SMU. As part of the Bush Presidential Library and Museum, we've established the George W. Bush Institute, as separate from the Laura W. Bush Institute for Women's Health. As George says, when we're out of politics, but we're still, of course, interested in policy. So through the Bush Institute, we can address the 4 policy areas that were the most important to us when George was president. And as you might guess, there's an overriding theme of freedom. Freedom from ignorance, our education initiative. Freedom from disease, our global health initiative. Promoting free enterprise, our economic initiative. And freedom from tyranny, human freedom. We plan to spend the rest of our lives working at the Bush Institute to promote freedom. We're happy that our girls are doing well. Jenna and Henry Hager are happily married, and as you may have heard, we're expecting our first grandchild, or Jenna's expecting our first grandchild in just the next couple of weeks. Jenna's working as a contributing correspondent for NBC's Today Show. You might have seen her on TV. George says she's just continuing the Bush family tradition of warm relations with the media. Too bad that has to be a joke. Our daughter Barbara has founded a nonprofit called Global Health Corps that places recent college graduates in the health field in underserved areas. Her third group of Global Health Corps fellows is at work in 3 cities in the United States and in 5 countries in Africa. You can learn more about Global Health Corps if you're interested, or if you know a young person who might be interested in serving as a Global Health Corps fellow by looking on the web at ghcorps.org. George and I are proud of the work our girls are doing, and we're happy to be back home in Texas, living what I call the afterlife in a state George calls the Promised Land. So today I'm happy to tell you about the great work being done by the Laura Welch Bush Institute for Women's Health. 5 years ago, when Chancellor Hance approached me about naming Texas Tech's Women's Health Institute the Laura Bush Institute for Women's Health, I was thrilled. I have a special affinity for Texas Tech. My father was in one of the first classes there, and I grew up in West Texas, and I remember those drives from Midland to Lubbock as a child, visiting my grandmother, and then, of course, going to Tech football games. In fact, I was thinking of beginning this speech with guns up, but then I decided it was too risky with a full room full of Secret Service agents. The Laura Welch Bush Institute for Women's Health is the only university research center in Texas uniquely focused on solving a broad spectrum of women's health issues. The Institute began as a community-wide effort to improve women's health through research and education. Since then, it's taken on some of the most pressing health problems that we face as women, including early diagnosis of ovarian cancer, finding better drugs to treat breast cancer, and an issue that's becoming more and more important to me, women and aging. Here in San Angelo, the Institute's health education programs have been so well received that local citizens have taken up the cause. Some of you may have seen the Concho Propane Company's truck painted pink and white with the Laura Bush Institute's logo that is driving around town to help get out the word of women's health, and that women's health matters. The Institute in San Angelo has educated thousands of Texas women from diverse backgrounds on the serious issues that they might face, including breast cancer, heart health, and HIV and AIDS. In 2010, the Laura Bush Institute started the Concho Valley Access to Breast Care for West Texas, and that's to help reduce the cases of undiagnosed or late diagnosis of breast cancer in medically underserved women. By providing breast cancer screening services to women in the 14 counties of the Concho Valley, the Institute helps eliminate geographic obstacles that can make getting treatment very difficult. And they've saved lives. And because we know that the good health of women begins with healthy girls, health education programs should start early. Through its Girl Power program, the Institute for Women's Health is working to help mothers and daughters talk about good health for young women, including self-esteem, exercise, and good nutrition. Angelo State freshmen, and this is such a terrific idea that you all have here, are invited every year to Girl Power's Girls Night Out, where the Institute provides information and education to college girls to help them confront all the challenges that they might have as freshmen. And I really want to congratulate you for this really terrific program. I think 700 or 800 freshmen show up for this Girls Night Out. So thank you, Linda, for that. And thank you to all of you for helping educate Angelo State freshman girls. At all 5 of the Texas Tech campuses in Amarillo, El Paso, Lubbock, San Angelo, and the Permian Basin, the Laura Bush Institute has expanded its research and education programs. Over the past 5 years, the Laura Bush Institute has become a national voice in gender differences in research and education. We know that men and women are created equal, but when it comes to health, research shows that gender differences can greatly affect medical diagnosis and treatment for men and women. So research programs funded by the Institute for Women's Health are investigating gender differences in Alzheimer's disease, alcohol addiction, and other chronic diseases. And thanks to the gender-specific and women's health curriculum that's been developed by the Institute, physicians and other medical professionals can learn how to better care for patients by taking their gender in account during diagnosis and treatment. National efforts to prevent heart disease have brought greater attention to the importance of gender disease in medical care. For many years, most Americans believed that heart disease was a man's disease. But in fact, it's the leading cause of death among American women and men. Each year in the United States, more than 500,000 women will have a heart attack, and 1 in 4 women in the United States will die from heart disease. Too often, women's symptoms of a heart attack are dismissed as just anxiety, even by their doctors, and are fatigue, and they get medical care too late. We know now that men and women may present different symptoms when experiencing a heart attack. Women may complain of jaw or shoulder pain or just extreme fatigue. Prevention is our best defense against heart disease. So understanding gender differences is a critical component in our efforts to educate men and women about heart health. The Laura Bush Institute for Women's Health works to ensure that medical professionals are better prepared to account for gender differences when treating all patients. The Institute's research improves the health of women here in West Texas, and the research will be able to help improve the health of women throughout our whole state, across our country, and around the world. Worldwide, a woman dies of breast cancer every 69 seconds. That's roughly 7 women since I started speaking to you. 1 in 4 women in Africa will develop cervical cancer. And every day, women die from preventable causes related to pregnancy and childbirth. These health challenges don't make the headlines, but the poor health of women affects families, communities, and whole countries. That's one of the reasons that I'm so thrilled that here in my home of West Texas, all these gender differences are being discovered so that soon across the world we'll be able to make sure that women are healthy everywhere. So thanks to each one of you for your support for the Laura Bush Institute for Women's Health. Because of this institute, the people in West Texas have access to quality care, and people around the world will benefit from research being done here. With your generosity, and thank you so much for your generosity today, we can give hope to countless mothers and sisters and wives and daughters so that they and their families can live healthy lives. Thank you all very much. Thank you all very, very much. Thanks, everybody. And now, Kent and I will have a fireside chat. You ready?
Do we have microphones?
Can you all hear?
I guess we do have microphones. Handle anything.
Perfect. Very smart of you, Chancellor. Thank you very much, Kent. Can you all hear it? You're going to have to turn it up.
Is that?
Okay, is this working now? No? We'll talk really loud.
Hello.
Mine works, yours doesn't.
You don't need to hear. She's the one you want to hear.
Let me just stop and say, you all may not know this, but Kent was George's opponent in the 1978 race when George ran for Congress. Kent was the Democrat, George was the Republican. Kent won. So now he's always credited himself with George winning President of the United States, because he thinks if George had won that race, he would have never been elected governor or president.
I always remind the president that if it weren't for me, you wouldn't be president. You know, you get through listening to her. Am I on yet?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. Excuse me. Just go ahead, Hans. You get through listening to her speech, and if you looked up in the dictionary the word class, her picture would be there.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Is that better? Oh, good. A lot better.
Thank you.
I want to talk a little about some of the experiences you had. Talk about going to Buckingham Palace and meeting the Queen. I mean, that's something that we'd all like to hear a little about.
Well, George and I were invited to a state dinner in England, which meant that we stayed in Buckingham Palace. We had butlers of our own and everything. That was really pretty fabulous. And then had a beautiful state dinner there with Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. And of course, it was thrilling. George and I couldn't believe 2 people from Midland, Texas were there staying in Buckingham Palace, but it was really a lot of fun and, just an experience you can't imagine ever having.
Well, that would have been so elegant and everything, but also compare that to some of the travels you had in Afghanistan and what women face, the issues they face in Afghanistan.
Well, I went to Afghanistan 3 times while George was president, and since we've been home, we've hosted it at the Bush Institute that'll be part of our library building that we dedicate on April 25th. The Institute building will be part of it, but we started the programming as soon as we moved home, and we've had 2 conferences on Afghan women, and I just heard from one of the women who came to those conferences, an educator who actually risked her life and ran the secret schools for girls during the time of the Taliban in Afghanistan. And I just got a message from her. She was in the United States for a conference and sent a message that she's worried. She's worried about us leaving, the U.S. leaving, and the way women are going to be treated in Afghanistan, and I'm worried for them too. They've made huge strides. There's a governor now. I visited her in Bamiyan province when I went to Afghanistan that's female, and girls are all back in school. I think they think there are over 6 million children in school now in Afghanistan, including about 2 million girls. So I think we'll all be watching from the United States, and I frankly wish our troops had stayed there just a little bit longer. I think they're going to need it, but anyway, we'll see. The Afghan army is standing up, and that's good, and the Afghan police forces, so I think that's good. And they have a constitution that they did vote on, and women's rights are secured in that constitution, but of course you don't know if the Taliban will respect that constitution, and probably they won't.
How's the president doing?
George is doing
going
great.
to the ranch very often?
We haven't gone to the ranch that often. We went for the week of Easter. We try to schedule a week in March and April and May so we can see the wildflowers bloom there. But he's doing great. He's hosting the Wounded Warriors in the W100, which he did in the Big Bend. It's a bike ride. The first year we were home, and then last year they rode in the Paladura, and Amarillo hosted it, and so now they're going to ride in Waco and at our ranch, and Waco's hosting the ride for the Wounded Warriors. So as part of our institute, the Bush Center, we're working on the 4 policy areas that I talked to you about, but running through those policy areas is a military veterans initiative to support our veterans, and then the women's initiative that the Egyptian Women's Fellowship was part of, that Dr. Jenkins served as a mentor to one of our fellows. So one of the things we're working on through the military initiative is trying to do a big survey of all the many veteran supporting groups that have popped up over the last few years and try to bring them together for best practices. And then George has both a golf tournament and a bike ride for Wounded Warriors. And their strength and their courage is really very inspiring to both of us.
Laura, one of the things that it didn't get a lot of publicity, but you and the president on a consistent basis went to see our troops that had been wounded. Mm-hmm. And talk a little about that.
Well, that, of course, is the hardest thing you have to do when you're a president and you put our troops in harm's way. But we did often go to Walter Reed and Bethesda, and then to other military hospitals, San Antonio, for instance, when we were here in Texas, and that's very difficult. The amazing thing was how courageous our troops are, and wounded, very severely wounded troops would just, say to George, I just want to get back out there with my unit. There's something very inspiring about it. We're so fortunate in our country that people volunteer. Such really fine people volunteer to serve in our military.
One of the things that the world in the last week has lost one of the great leaders of all time, in my opinion, Margaret Thatcher. And I know that she was very close to Reagan and President Bush 41. but y'all had the occasion to meet her. And say a little about what you and George think of her.
Well, we knew her really only through the Bushes, and I mean, obviously through President Reagan as well, and then for my father-in-law, President Bush, when he became president. But she was such an example for women, not just for men, but also this very classy woman. You know how she always was, her hair was fixed perfectly, and she was always dressed up. Really looked at all the pictures that have been in the newspapers and on television since Monday when she died, and sort of struck again by how she looked always, which I think was so terrific for a prime minister, a woman prime minister, female prime minister. But she just was tough and really led Britain in so many great ways. And the other thing about her, which was also true of Prime Minister Tony Blair when George was president, was that she was so aware of the special relationship. She was always very pro-American, and so was Tony Blair. And you know, to know that our country has that kind of friend in Great Britain is great solace, really, to our presidents, I think, and to our government. And I know it certainly was to President Reagan and President Bush, all during the time, her years and their years, of course, were the times of the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the rise of all those democracies, those Central and Eastern European democracies, which, by the way, are also very pro-American, those countries that George and I would visit. And they are very dependent on the friendship of the United States, and not just the friendship, but the alliance, the military alliance of the United States. And many of those Central and Eastern European countries have now, they're all democracies, and they've now joined NATO and other alliances with the United States. But she was certainly a great friend to our country, and she'll be missed.
How many foreign trips did you take, or do you have a number? And
I visited 76 countries, but while George was president, and many with him on trips that he went on, but then also I went to Afghanistan 3 times solo. I did several trips to Africa. I could go to represent him in Africa, for instance, when he launched PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. And Barbara, our daughter, went with us when we launched it in 2003. And she was so struck by the story of one little girl in an AIDS clinic in Uganda who was so thin, you knew she was dying. But her mother dressed her in a beautiful white dress to meet the American president. And we don't know what happened to that little girl, but Barbara was so affected by it that she went back to Yale and took their big course on AIDS. And then when she graduated from Yale, she got a job in Cape Town, South Africa at a Red Cross Children's Hospital. And then that's really how she thought of starting Global Health Corps. She could find a job in Cape Town, South Africa, because she knew somebody on the Global Health Desk at the State Department that knew somebody in the Red Cross Hospital. But she knew that a lot of other American and foreign young people who might want to serve in global health wouldn't have that kind of contact. And so that's what Global Health Corps is, really. It's a way to give young people a chance to help health clinics or health ministries develop capacity to serve more people. So that was really great. And now our global health initiative that we're doing through the Pink Ribbon, Red Ribbon, and Dr. Jenkins was at the launch of it, is called Pink Ribbon, Red Ribbon. We've added the testing and treatment for cervical cancer, which is the leading cause of cancer death among African women, to the PEPFAR platform. Our partner is the U.S. State Department, because we're using the AIDS platform that was established while George was president, and now adding the testing and treatment for cervical cancer to it. And so George and I have been to Africa twice since we've been back. We refurbished a clinic last summer in Zambia, and this summer we'll be going and hosting a conference for African First Ladies, sponsored by Exxon, to get the word out to them about health issues and education as well. So we're still traveling a lot and enjoying that trip, because people in Africa, people literally say to George, thank you, you saved my life. Because about 7 million people now are on antiretrovirals, and they're living and not dying with AIDS.
You get a lot of accolades and everything, but I want to tell you that you did such a good job, and George did, with those girls. They are great kids, and they grew up with a dad that was president and governor, and that's not easy. And Jenna, I love Jenna. That night at the White House, she laughed at every story I told.
She did? She thought Kent was very hilarious, and we had him tell about every funny story we could think of. And actually, why don't you tell everyone about, remember when you were running against George, and George was going to run in that marathon? George was quite athletic. I don't know that Kent was. Remember that story?
Yeah. One night at the White House, we were having dinner, and there were just Jody Arrington's with us, just the four of us. And the president looked over at me and he said, "Who did you hire to run in that marathon?" It had been like 20-something years. I thought he had forgotten. And he said, "Who was it?" And I said, I don't. And what the story was, there was a marathon, they were around 26 miles, and they asked George and I to run in it, and he signed up, and I didn't. And I hired a guy to run in it. And he had a Hance t-shirt, and his trunks had a Hance bumper sticker on the rear. And I said, "You stay 10 feet in front of him. If he speeds up, you speed up. If he slows down, you slow down." And anyway, the president, he was really ribbing about it. He said, "Look, I need to have IRS look into that guy." And he was just kidding, but it was really funny. We still laugh about some of those stories. And, the Bushes, President Reagan told me something one time, that people have a tendency to vote for you, especially if they'd like to live next door to you. You'd love to live next door to the Bushes. They're just great people. And we appreciate all that you've done for women's health. And this group, we could go on and on, but we've got other things on the program. And we just like lunch. And we just want to tell you how much that we appreciate your friendship for the people in West Texas, your love for this area, and what you're doing on women's health issues. And I want to say one more time to the people in San Angelo, thank you. You are all stars, and I am very proud of you.
Thank you all, and thank you so much to the Laura Bush Institute for Women's Health for your life-saving work. Very thrilled about it. Thanks, everybody.